Good evening, my fellow Canadians. Well, normally I do my posts when it's daylight, which I prefer. However, I came across something on one of the firearms boards that I follow, and it was a group I'd never heard of in the US called the Oath Keepers. And the current Democratic government has labeled them as right-wing extremists. So I looked to find out more about them. I looked on Googled them. And I found a post that says they are indeed right-wing extremists. I saw who labeled them. That was interesting. Um, the Anti-Defamation League, which are a bunch of loony leftists, labeled them right-wing extremists. It led me into something that I'm seeing, and I'm predicting that this is coming. Listening to the term right-wing extremists coming from the Democrats would be like listening to the term right-wing extremists coming from Antifa or BLM or any of the loony left or socialist or Marxist groups. Here's the progression. The loony left will label you right-wing extremists. Whether or not you are is totally immaterial. You will be named as right-wing extremists. Now, to the left, and this is important, to the left, if you do not agree with our narrative, and not only agree with our narrative and our viewpoint, you must not only agree, but you must support our position. If you attempt to debate, you are right-wing extremists. If you attempt to point out flaws in their reasoning, you're a right-wing extremist. If you take any other position except theirs, you are a right-wing extremist. It's that simplistic, and it's that polarized to the loony left. Now, this is important. By labeling you a right-wing extremist, that justifies on the part of a government unleashing government agencies on you. Like in the United States, it would be the FBI. They want to label the Oath Keepers as a domestic terrorist group. So that justifies setting loose the authorities, the FBI or any other security agency, to infiltrate, to examine, to harass, if they wish, for loony left neighbors now to hate on you, to harass you. In Canada, of course, it would be the RCMP or CSIS would infiltrate you or put you under the microscope if you are labeled right-wing extremists. Fortunately, here, with the RCMP, with all their flaws, and CSIS, are not so arbitrary, let's say, as the FBI, which has gotten a very bad rap of late, and deservedly so. What was that term? FBI, famous but incompetent. Well, with apologies to any good FBI agent out there. The Oath Keepers are composed of ex-military, ex-law enforcement, ex-first responders, and you don't volunteer to join. You will be recruited if they feel you are suitable, if your viewpoints. They are sworn to defend the Constitution. This is their mandate. Now, to digress slightly, when I was at the Pegida rally, and I mentioned this in a previous post, Pegida was labeled anti-Islamophobic, or anti-Islam, Islamophobic, which they're not, alt-right, which they're not, and I think it was white supremacist or something equally stupid. Anyways, there were three mischaracterizations applied to Pegida. None of the people who applied these, that's that idiot Mayor Tory or Pam Seidel from City News, we know about City News, never talked to anybody from Pegida, and obviously never read their mission statement. Now, this is important. If you look at a group, look at their mission statement, look at their mandate. Don't listen to the narrative. Read what they are saying, or at least talk to them. No, if you do that, you're a right-wing extremist. So Pegida had the Proud Boys to show up. They came to provide security because these are mature women who had put this together, Jenny being the leader of the group. And Tim, a wonderful gentleman who's also older, and myself, we're older people. They put it together. I was there to support them. Against the violence offered by Antifa, Proud Boys showed up. The Wolves of Odin showed up. I think the Daughters of Odin showed up to help and provide security and to document any untoward or aggressive or violent behavior on the part of Antifa. So because they were there, well, the Proud Boys are obviously a domestic terror group. So what they're going to do is apply this label. Now, once this label is applied, once you are named as a right-wing extremist, that justifies any government or even civilian action taken against you because you're a right-wing extremist. We are therefore fully prepared to harass you, to provoke you, to make your life difficult, to get in your face, because you're a right-wing extremist. So what happens when they start to harass or provoke or otherwise negatively engage with you? They provoke or create a violent reaction, depending on the degree of violence visited. Most of them, centrists like myself, we're slow. We understand the dynamic. We won't respond to threats of violence so much as we will to direct offered violence. We understand that we're being provoked into action. Once they provoke a violent response, then they will sit there and they will go, see, we told you they were violent. We told you they're a violent and extremist group. Now, what will get totally lost in all this is the fact that we have harassed them. We have provoked them. No. That will all get lost. That will get swept under the rug with the compliance, as we know, of the mainstream media, and all this will get put by. So when they put their message out and try to present their side of the story, they will be dismissed because they're right-wing extremists, and right-wing extremists lie. So this is really interesting, to demonize your opponent before they've even done anything to warrant being demonized. You do what the term I've always liked, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I told you they were violent. There's an old joke which I've always liked, the epitaph on the grave of a hypochondriac, where he says, see, I told you I was sick. It is the start by the Democrats to even more deeply divide and polarize the U.S. citizenry. And they're going after now, apparently, the Trump supporters who are calling themselves Trump's army. Army, that was the word. You see, they're violent. They're right-wing extremists, all of them. All of those, 70 plus million people who voted for Trump, you're all right-wing extremists. And because you are right-wing extremists, any actions we take against you are totally justified because we are doing this from a moral high ground. The convoluted logic of this astounds me. I've said in previous posts, a civil war is coming. It will be a war of words, a war of opinions, but it will explode into violence. It has. And the interesting thing, the violence I have seen perpetuated has always always, every time, been started by the left. Every time. Violent actions, assaults have been committed by the left. And the only time I have seen the so-called right wing engage in violence was when it was brought to them. And yet, it's these so-called right-wing groups that are going to be labeled domestic terrorists. Coach Red Pill does tremendous videos on this from a US perspective. Of course, I'm doing mine from a Canadian perspective. But he makes a lot of sense. And what he says is frighteningly predictive. I am truly afraid for what is going to happen in North America over the next several years. And I mean this, I am truly afraid because people are going to die. And when you trace it back objectively, when you trace it back, if you trace it back objectively, you will find that it was left-wing intolerance that provoked and ignited this. If you follow the mainstream media, no, you won't get that perspective. So hang on to your hat, folks. Learn how to shoot, because the day's coming where, my God, it's sadly said, but you're going to have to know how to. Sad. But unfortunately and sadly, I think true. Have a good evening.